Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're joining from the West Coast. My name is Megan Schultz-Fontes, and I'm the Executive Director of NERC, Northeast Recycling Council, and we are very excited to be working with the Center for Biological Diversity to bring you this webinar on adoption of reuse in federal and state food code guidance. So a quick couple of notes before we get started. It is being recorded. We are going to provide the recording as well as all of the presentations on our website, and we'll email that out to you following the webinar. So those will be available. We will have a Q&A box down below that you can use to submit any of your questions as all of our speakers are presenting into that box. Some speakers may be able to respond to them before we get to the Q&A session at the end. And then let's see, a quick note about NERC. We are working to minimize waste, conserve natural resources, and advance a sustainable economy through facilitated collaboration and action. We have 11 states that are a part of our organization and about 100 advisory member organizations. And we do this in a lot of different ways that include free educational webinars like this one, committees, as well as our annual conference, and developing lots of other free resources. So our agenda today is we will have our 4 speakers present. We will have a brief moderated discussion, and then we'll go into the Q&A session at the end where you can ask questions directly to the speakers there as well. And they'll address everything they weren't able to address. These are our great, fabulous speakers here today. We have Megan, Yayoi, Sonia, Alisa, and Kelly. All right. And so now I am very excited to introduce our first speaker today, Kelly. And let me just go ahead and stop my screen share.
Awesome.
All right. So Kelly Dennings will kick us off. And she is a senior campaigner with the nonprofit Center for Biological Diversity, where she develops and executes advocacy and outreach initiatives that address the connections between gender equity, endless growth, and the climate and extinction crisis. Prior to the center, she worked as a local government recycling coordinator, then worked for North Carolina's Department of Environment and Natural Resources before moving to the nonprofit sector, where she also worked with Keep America Beautiful and the American Forest Foundation. She holds a bachelor's degree in natural resources from NC State and a master's degree in public health from the University of South Florida. Welcome, Kelly. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. We are just so excited to be partnering with you on another webinar. You have such a great audience that comes to these. We've already got so many folks participating today. So yes, my name's Kelly Dennings. I'm actually based in Jacksonville, Florida, which is Miccosukee land, and I want to acknowledge that they should receive restorative measures for the harm that's been done to their land. The center likes to do regular land acknowledgments that way. So a quick overview about the center. So we're a national nonprofit conservation organization that works through a combination of science, the law, activism, and creative media to protect wildlife in the wild places they need to thrive. So on the screen, you're seeing all of our different programs. So I want to acknowledge that portions of this presentation were created by Anthony Lamondo, a great PhD candidate that conducted this research and published a report about it. And in the chat, hopefully we're going to share that journal article. It's by the National Environmental Health Association, the Journal of Environmental Health article. So our goal with this research really was to answer various questions regarding the permissivity of reusable containers in food serviceware at the federal, state levels, and then advocate for the changes that we saw. So as you'll soon hear, which is why we're so excited to be partnering with NERC, who has this 11-state alliance, each state handles their food code differently, and that's partly why we created this national database to see the differences. So I apologize if this seems remedial, but if you're not well steeped in the food code, folks can find it confusing. So let's start with the federal food code. While you have the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, policy implementation is often handled at the departmental bureaucracy level. So um, food-related items are coordinated through the executive branch's Department of Ag, Department of Commerce, and the Department of Health and Human Services. These three in the middle here. So the FDA is within that Department of Health and Human Services, and they work to protect our health and ensure the safety of our nation's food supply. So as you may now know, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is currently the head of DHHS, and Martin Makary is the head of the FDA, helping RFK implement gold standard science and make America healthy again. So that's the entity that we are talking about right now. So then to dive deeper into the FDA and the Federal Food Code, it's not law nor regulation. It is a model that represents advice, and while it's designed to be consistent with federal law, it makes no legal mandates. Its goal is really just to prevent contamination and the outbreak of disease. Okay, so I know I'm going through these fast. You're going to get my slide deck so you can read these later, but essentially I just went over the left-hand side, that federal side. So now let's go over the right-hand side. So this advice from the FDA Food Code can be adopted by the states. States may require changes to the food code be conducted through state legislature, through departmental rulemaking, or even delegate it to local governments for variances. So you're going to hear a lot about all of this, all of these different examples today. So to complicate this, the federal FDA food code is updated every 4 years. But just because a new federal food code comes out, it does not mean that a state adopts it. So this map shows the variety in states using various versions of the Federal Food Code as guidance. So also in the chat, if you are curious about which food code your state is on, there's a couple of URLs being shared in the chat right now that allow you to figure out what food code your state is on. This map can get a little small for the New England areas. So then to complicate it even further, states can adopt the Federal Food Code verbatim, which is called short form, or they can adopt bits and pieces of it, which is called long form. So each state is on a different year, and each state may be doing long or short form. Let me know if you need help finding those links, Megan. So here are the research questions we were trying to answer. If you can do the one that says FDA or give me access, I don't think I can post to anybody but the hosts. Nope, still not the right link, Megan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's fda.gov/media download, or there's the Retail Food Safety Collaborative.org. It should be right under the flipbook one.
Yeah, I put that one in. It's
Okay. Yeah, I'll chat it to you or to the panelists, and then
okay.
you can share that out with everyone. So here are the research questions we were trying to answer. The first three relate to BYO, and the next three relate to restaurants options. So what Anthony did for us is he looked at the different federal food codes from 2001 to 2017. So if you go to those links that were just shared and you figure out your state's baseline food code, he looked at each of the applicable reuse sections. So the food code's 700 pages. We don't care about all 700 pages. So he looked at the applicable food codes for each state and the federal ones to compare and contrast them. So if you're a food code wonk, you might have known that there was a new food code that came out in 2022, but nothing in that was pertaining to reuse. So Anthony's data is still valid at that point. So shown on the screen, you're seeing all the different terms that he looked for. And here on out, I'm going to be mostly referring to the 2017 and 2013 versions of the Federal Food Code, which would apply to 32 states. So if you are a state that's not on the 2017 and 2013, once you look at those uh, uh, links I shared, then you, you, you know, if you're on some of the older codes, we can talk later. So sorry, Megan, I added those extra ones in today. All right, so lots of text on this slide. So the left side of the screen essentially talks about reusing within a restaurant. So for example, you're at a buffet and they ask you to get a second plate when you come back, right? So that's kind of the second-hand side. And then the right-hand side of the screen talks specifically about restaurant-provided to-go containers. So um, this is an approved to-go container drink from a tropical smoothie. So, you know, you might remember that Starbucks for a while was selling to-go containers and they were willing to kind of refill their own container. So that is where this is in the food code. So if the container is made for reuse and is returned to the restaurant for cleaning before refilling, it would be allowed. But this is where it specifically says single-use items cannot be refilled. So you might remember that. Now, also in here, you're going to see that it talks about referring to parts 4.6 and 4.7. So that refers to another part of the food code, but I'm essentially going to tell you what that says. So it says that a BYO container, but all reusable containers have to have these components. They have to be safe, durable, corrosive resistant, non-absorbent, sufficient in weight and thickness to withstand repeated wear washing. They need to be finished to have a smooth, easy, cleanable surface and resistant to pitting, chipping, grazing, scratching, scoring, distortion, and decomposition. So a thick walled, this is double insulated cup, you know, would be allowed, or kind of like your steel mug like this would be allowed. This, you know, reusing your like yogurt tub or whatever, that would be considered single use. That is not allowed in the food code. And this, you know, Aussie container though, that's made for reuse, very thick and durable, would be allowed. So this side of the screen also dives into consumer-owned beverage containers. So what I just shared is applicable both for a restaurant-provided container or a BYO. So the other thing that we want to mention here is how you get your food or beverage into your personal container. So it really talks here about a contamination-free process. You'll hear that a lot. And really they're referring to spigots or scoops or, you know, the pull down levers. So yeah, this is important. And it also refers to non-time and temperature controlled foods. So it really is looking at like a black coffee with maybe a non-dairy creamer, but when you get fancy into your, you know, whole milk lattes and stuff, that wouldn't necessarily be covered in this version of the food code. Okay. So this slide brings in this idea of a food processing plant. So again, whether you're BYO or you're going with a third-party plant, a third-party sanitizer, the containers need to be durable, they have to be properly cleaned, and this idea again of the contamination-free process, you can see here, there's a number of technical terms to make sure that you're doing a contamination-free process into a reusable container. But this is in the 2013 and 2017 food code. So, you know, it is doable in those states. All right, so let me show you a state example that has some model food code language, which is Washington State. So my little nomenclature in the middle here, BYO beverage. means that a consumer could refill their own beverage container as long as the dispensing unit doesn't touch your container, and that, you know, it is a container like one that I just described. BYO refill um, means that you can ask a restaurant to put food in your container that you brought from home. So this is one of the places where Washington has updated their food code. They were one of the first out of the gate. And specifically, their food code says a consumer can ask an employee to refill a visibly clean consumer-owned container with food using a contamination-free process. This does not mean the employee has to actually do what they say, though. And then BYO leftover means you can bring your own container as a doggy bag. And then we've kind of already talked about the establishment refill and third-party cleaning. So if you ask me for your state food code information, you will get a little overview slide like this. And then you get all the detail that you might have ever wanted. All right. And we'll give you the link to that at the end. So through Coalition, of which some of you were a part, Model Reuse Food Code language was submitted to the FDA for future guidance. And so this was where, yes, you can learn about this updated information from the FDA, and a helpful handout from the Conference for Food Protection is maybe also being shared in the chat. So that came out from this process with the FDA. And really the early adopting work of California, Washington, and Oregon is what supported the FDA to change the National Food Code guidance. So this recommendation was submitted to the FDA. And then at the end of 2024, the FDA took the recommendation and finalized them into an addendum to the 2022. So on these alternating biennial years, when the food code is updated every 4 years, every 2 years there will be an addendum. So there was an addendum in 2024 to the 2022 food code, of which in 2026, that addendum gets added to the very big main food code. Sorry for all those dates, but so I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but essentially some of the great stuff that happened, these were the highlights that came out of the FDA, was they removed food processing plants, so we now get to bring your own. They expanded it to allow food along with beverages to be refilled. And they removed this time and temperature controlled requirement, allowing for hot and cold food and beverages. So this is why it's so important that we get these states to adopt this new food code language. So in conclusion, at a national level, looking at just the 2013 and 2017 federal food code, so even if your state is not going to adopt this new one right away, it matters if you're refilling the container. It matters if it's your container. All these things matter. And really what I want to take away from this slide that Anthony made for me is it is confusing, and we need to be educating the public about what is already allowed. And that's whether you're a restaurant, a health inspector, or the public. So we got some folks on here today that are going to talk to us about that. Finally, the center is supporting this Research and Environmental Uses and Sustainable Economies Act. So I think that will also be shared in the chat here. We've got an organizational sign-on that is still moving through kind of a rolling deadline. But then if you can't sign on as your organization, you can also sign on as an individual. So the next short and long-term steps that the center sees is, now that we're diving into the food code and interpreting what is and isn't currently allowed in each state, again, we need to get this education out to the public. Various states are creating educational information to decrease this confusion. But our longer term goals would be, we need to continue to update modeling this language. So there is now research going on that's like, well, how does one update their food code language? Do you have a food code advisory group? Do they accept public comments and have hearings? What is the local government variance process? And then finally, the coalition is probably going to continue to evolve the National Food Code language to potentially include non-toxic reuse, which would mean not using plastics. All right, so if you want to get involved in this work, please reach out to me at Kelly. We do meet regularly through Upstream's Reuse Forum. And if you want your detailed state-by-state information, you can fill out that form. Thank you so much. I know it's always just like so much information.
All right, thank you so much, Kelly. And sorry again about the links, but someone did ask if we were going to share those afterwards, and we definitely will be doing that. I am very excited to introduce our next speaker, Megan Mansfield Pryor, who is a waste management climate policy advisor at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And she previously staffed the Materials Management Task Force of the Maine Climate Council at the Governor Office of Policy Innovation, integrating waste strategies into Maine Won't Wait 2024. Previously, she was at Mass DEP as an environmental specialist, overseeing product stewardship programs and promoting sustainable waste management. Excuse me one second. I just want to make sure I get her spotlighted here. And she also served on the NERC board for 6 years and holds a master's in policy planning and management and a bachelor's degree in environmental planning and policy from the University of Southern Maine. So without further ado, Megan, thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Very happy to be here. And I have bounced around a bit in the last couple of years, so it is confusing, but I have recently moved from being a waste management climate policy advisor with the state of Maine. Now I'm back at the Department of Environmental Protection, but the work that I'm going to talk about today started several years back when I was working at DEP here in Maine as well. Can everybody see my slides and are they moving forward?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Megan mentioned, I was recently working on our climate action plan, and there are some recommendations in there that are tied to reuse. So I'm going to touch briefly on our climate plan. It has 4 big overarching goals. We want to reduce emissions, strengthen resilience, create jobs and economic prosperity, and bring climate action to all Maine people. So make sure that we're thinking about climate action in an equitable manner. These are the sector-specific working groups of our Climate Council, and we also have 2 subcommittees that help ensure that we're working with the most recent scientific and technical data and that we're thinking about things through the equity lens. And I was brought over to GOPIS specifically to work on bringing waste and materials in. We formed a task force called the Materials Management Task Force that ran for 6 months and developed a lot of recommendations around reducing emissions from waste and materials that are in our current climate action plan, Maine Won't Wait 2024. We didn't have a separate chapter, but they're kind of tucked into all these other chapters. And I have links to the climate action plan that I can share out if anybody wants to take a look. We have quite a few recommendations around waste and materials now, especially compared to our 2020 climate action plan, which didn't have recommendations around waste. And one reason for that is if you look at emissions from a sector-based or territorial perspective, you can see that waste is a really small part of our emissions. It's only about 2% of our sector-based emissions. One of the recommendations in our current climate action plan was to start looking more at consumption-based emissions. And this chart on the left here shows when you look at things from the sector-based perspective, you're missing that the other kind of big chunk of emissions that comes from imported materials that we consume and use. So a lot of the recommendations that would reduce waste are the same recommendations that would start tackling those consumption-based emissions, because it's really, when you reuse things, it's really more about reducing extraction emissions upstream than reducing your sector-based emissions. And so that's what we have in our climate action plan, reducing waste and emissions from products that people buy and use, and supporting reuse, refill, and repair, leading by example at the state level through actions like buying more durable goods, switching to reuse, and also just trying to make sure that we're increasing access to waste management planning and programs. We have a lot of really rural areas where communities don't have the same access to, say, composting or recycling that they do in the more urban areas that have curbside collection. But we also are aware that multifamily units often don't have the same access to programs. So That was another recommendation. The climate plan is trying to think about making sure that we're really taking a more equitable approach across the state to providing people with access to those programs. On the left, you can see that snapshot of our consumption-based emissions. It's the blue line above the red line. The red line represents our sector-based emissions. A recent study that EPA did in 2024 found that for a lot of the Northeast states, our consumption-based emissions are quite a bit higher than our sector-based emissions. So that just gives you a little snapshot of how much work that we have to do to start thinking about that. But recently, up until recently, we didn't really have good data on what was driving consumption-based emissions. And now EPA has developed the tools, and those will be available for states to begin pulling their own consumption-based emissions inventory, and with a little bit more specifics on what materials are driving those emissions. So we tend not to think about resource extraction when we're just talking about packaging, but it's true that, plastic, most of it comes from fracking natural gas or oil refinery, or logging if it's from paper. So when we can design systems where materials are reused instead of disposed, it can really reduce those upstream emissions from those activities related to resource extraction. This is just a quick snapshot to really highlight how reuse has an emissions impact. So looking at different kinds of packaging, if you have a compostable plastic, obviously that isn't designed for reuse, it's not intended. So if you're thinking about it strictly from an emissions perspective, the compostable packaging, the polylactic acid, it really doesn't have a positive benefit in terms of emission. It's still a single-use product. But you can see here that if you have packaging like a rigid plastic or a glass, the more that you reuse that every single time you reuse it, you're offsetting those upstream emissions from producing new packaging, and it really adds up over time. And obviously, unfortunately, the Warm tool, you can't model compostable paper-based package, so I'm not sure how that would compare, but I think nothing really gets close to the emissions benefits from reuse. So back to what happened in Maine for us to update our food code. During the COVID-19 pandemic, some of the researchers at the University of Maine were really paying attention to some of the articles in the news about increased waste generation. There were concerns about contamination, and some communities stopped recycling altogether because they were concerned about catching the virus off of materials. We found out later that concern wasn't really founded, but at the beginning there were so many unknowns. So those researchers were thinking a lot about waste. Specifically, they started thinking about takeout food because so many people were eating in during the pandemic. That was kind of the only fun treat that people could do in some cases. So they decided to pull together a research group to start talking about packaging waste and think about how we could work together for solutions to reduce that waste. I was part of that group. We had researchers from the university, we had representatives from our hospitality sector, from our waste sector, and from our health inspection program. And we all met multiple times over the course of a year and then some. So the end result is that, just like what Kelly was showing in her slide, there's a specific section of the food code that we identified as being the real barrier to businesses providing reusable containers. So while most of our food code is still, I think it's the 2013 version, a lot of it we updated to this more recent one that Kelly was showing, and this change enabled cafeterias, food trucks, and restaurants to give customers reusable takeout containers that could be cleaned and reused. However, that's not where it stopped, because in 2023, a small business approached one of our legislators and noted that although they had access to the same kind of sterilization and cleaning equipment that any restaurant would, they still couldn't provide reusable containers because they were making meal kits instead of being a restaurant or other place that sold food directly, like a cafeteria. So that representative brought forth a bill, LD 29, and that is now a law. And I've linked to this in the chat if you want to look at the language for any of this or look at the testimony. There's some great facts in the testimonies that were submitted in support of this bill. So under this law, businesses now have the right to use or accept reusable packaging, but they don't have to. Customers can also bring their own containers, and businesses can sell food and then bring it back and sterilize it and sell it to that customer or a different customer. And a business also has the right to refuse a container. That was a big concern from some of the businesses during the testimonies on the bill. They didn't want to have somebody bring a questionable looking container in and be forced to fill it. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And our agriculture department is responsible for providing technical assistance and education to businesses and consumers on best practices to ensure that we're being safe in the way that we're managing and sterilizing containers. And since these laws passed, there hasn't been a huge amount of opportunity to really test them out yet, but there are some projects going that are pretty exciting. The University of Maine got grant funding through NOAA for marine debris reduction. And while a lot of the research that that project is focused on is on developing sustainable biodegradable packaging from natural materials, there is one component of the project that's focused on reuse. So they're going to do reusable food service pilots in 3 communities in Maine that are all coastal. And it's a really useful project because each of the communities is a little bit different. There's one that's extremely, their economy is pretty much all tourism based. Another one has more of a year-round population, but is a small community. And the other one is a significantly larger and more urban community. So 3 different communities. It's going to be really interesting to see how the pilots work out and what data we can collect. And hopefully the idea is that this will also enable us to build a base from which to scale up because we can see what works, what's working in Maine, what works with a really, heavy tourism economy as opposed to a year round to get people to bring those containers back and not treat them as souvenirs. So that pilot's going to be rolling out over the next year and hopefully we'll build up from there. And there's also been a coalition formed called Reuse Maine, and that's a volunteer coalition that's been meeting regularly. They're focused a lot on bring your own right now. So hopefully their work, which is mostly centered around the greater Portland area, which is Maine's biggest city, will start to normalize reuse, at least in that more urban environment. And again, hopefully start to scale out and catch on in other places in the state now that we at least have the legal basis that allows that to happen. And that's all I have for today. But I've got some links to our climate plan that I can share out. We have a dashboard that has information on what's been happening and an update. So happy to take questions afterward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. And yes, I included those links in the chat, so hopefully everyone can access those. All right, so next, I'm very excited to introduce Sonia Williams, a program consultant at CET and True Zero Waste. Advisor. She's focused on waste prevention, reduction, and diversion in Massachusetts. With a background in public education, public health, and environmental science, Sonia is passionate about developing practical and accessible guidance for communities to build on success and stay motivated for positive change. All right, Sonia.
Great, thank you so much. Sorry, let me get a little situated. Share screen. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today. This is a wonderful group to be with. I'm here with CET and Recycling Works. So some background about us and what we do. Recycling Works Massachusetts is funded by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and delivered by CET, which is a nonprofit organization. So everything we offer, all of our services are an entirely no cost and funded by Mass DEP. Recycling Works is a recycling assistance program to help businesses and institutions reduce waste and maximize recycling, reuse, and food recovery opportunities. So a little more background for how we came about. Recycling Works exists to support the goals of the Mass DEP Solid Waste Master Plan. And so over the years, we've developed several best management practice guidance documents that have offered resources for the different components of the EPA hierarchy to offer recommendations to meet the goals of that master plan. So one that is near and dear to my heart, because I was working on it from day one till today. Every day we're working at it, improving it, listening to what people need and how we can change and make it better, is the consensus-based best management practices for reusable food and beverage containers in food establishments. So a little project background. The goal, had the goal of reducing single-use disposable containers. This goal emerged as a priority within the solid waste master plan. So not that single-use containers were a banned item, but that we saw it as an important goal towards reducing waste to meet the goals of the master waste plan. So Recycling Works emulated a model that has been successful in years past, where we and the Mass DEP collaborated closely with the Department of Public Health, as well as many local and regional health officials, to develop other BMPs for food establishments, including food donation and collecting food scraps for composting, anaerobic digestion, and animal feed. Recycling Works held 3 stakeholder meetings with over 150 people, including state, local, and regional public health officials, restaurant owners, and other food service professionals, reusable takeout container service providers, and environmental advocacy organizations. Participants shared their ideas, support, concerns, experiences, product pitches, and more. Recycling Works consolidated the notes and created working drafts for further input. As a consensus-based document, it is focused on the basic alignment with state goals and not raising individual concerns or implementation challenges. Working drafts were reviewed for accuracy by Mass DEP and the Department of Public Health. The goal for this project was to help achieve Mass DEP's goal of reducing solid waste going for disposal while ensuring that our recommendations are consistent with the state food code to protect public health. So the guidance process, input, and applicability, those who can benefit from this, everyone at the stakeholder meetings contributing were also those who would benefit from this document as well. Excuse me. The Massachusetts Department of Public Health was included in the meetings, and they were very helpful confirming or adjusting some of the content language and advised on the specific code references. They've offered support to help interpret the food code, but emphasized that the 351 local health departments have the final say. Local health departments are the ones who know their food establishments, how they comply with current regulations, and how that could translate to the use of reusable takeout containers. Mark Carleo, Senior Food Safety Trainer from Mass Department of Public Health, included his contact information in our guidance document to be a resource on interpretation of the food code. So after meeting with stakeholder groups, conducting one-on-one interviews, and researching the topic, Recycling Works found 3 distinct scenarios for reusables had emerged. Establishment-provided containers for takeout and leftovers, beverage containers from consumer-provided containers, like bringing your own travel mug, and retail and bulk use, consumer-provided containers, like bringing a Tupperware, for example, to be refilled. We developed this image to show the cycle of establishment-provided reusable containers to help visualize steps for implementing an establishment-provided reusable container program. Even though the use of establishment-provided reusable containers is not explicitly mentioned in the Massachusetts Merged Food Code, all of the components of the cycle are addressed there. In general, entities that are in the business of preparing and serving food to the public are already practicing the measures necessary to adopt the safe use of reusable containers. I'm gonna actually just skip these 2 slides and save them for review for after, if anyone would like to read through some of these specifics for consumer beverage containers and reusable bulk food containers. I think some of this has been addressed earlier. A great grab-and-go guide we developed is our implementation guide. So we have our guidance document that's hefty and dense, and we love it. And we have this grab-and-go implementation guide that's front and back and seen as a toolkit for those who want to implement a reusable program, sort of checklist, go through what do I need, where am I in the process. And then when in doubt, there's always our information at the bottom of every document we release that offers our no-cost technical assistance funded by Mass DEP. The most fun I had all summer was writing these blog posts about amazing reuse work across Massachusetts, amplifying the stories to inspire of successful reusable programs Just to name a few, not all of them, we have Zero Waste Arlington providing reusable cups at their beer garden events and preventing the use of 2,700 single-use cups. Fulfilled Goods allows customer-provided containers for self-filling so that customers are getting as much or as little as they'd like and avoiding single-use packaging. Boston University is doing wonderful things, switching to reusables in their dining halls and have prevented over 400,000 single-use takeout containers since 2023. Care for the Cape has several pilot initiatives for restaurants looking to implement switching from plastic straws to durable stainless steel straws, among many other initiatives. And then not listed right here, but Mount Holyoke College is also doing amazing things with reusables, and we have a blog post about them as well, and we're just really eager to continue amplifying these stories. At the end of our resource document, we have providers and product information. This is a living document. So if you're hearing me talking today and you're saying, oh, well, we're a takeout container provider, I'd love to be on your list. Let's talk. Let's see if you'd be a great fit. We can include your information. We're always editing this, expanding it, making sure it's up to date to meet the needs of the people we're supporting. Additional resources are available as well. And that's that. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Sonia. And you have some great resources in your slide deck as well. So I started populating the chat with some of those too. And then, yeah, if anyone has any questions, we can definitely get to those to the end. But next, I'm very happy to welcome Elisa. Let me get her spotlighted here. 1 second. So Elisa Shargorodsky, hopefully I said that decently. She is a passionate visionary whose career is focused on improving source reduction, solid waste prevention outcomes in the Philadelphia area. She has worked across a variety of sectors, supporting reuse and circularity for festivals, school districts, as well as in food, beverage, and grocery sectors, teaching them how to minimize waste without losing their cool. As the founder and director of Ecosystems, Elisa is dedicated to growing the local circular economy with ECO's partners who share the vision for a cleaner Philadelphia. She holds a degree in urban studies and design from the University of Pennsylvania and is a voting member of PR3, building a national standard for reuse, and was named Reuse Activist of the Year in 2024 by Upstream Solutions. All right, welcome, Elisa, again.
Thank you. And I'm so glad to be here, and thank you to everyone who has joined today. I would like to share my screen. I'm having a bit of, it's being a little bit funny here, but would somebody mind sharing it for me? Because for some reason it's not allowing me to share.
I've got you up if you want,
Okay,
Elisa.
great. Okay, great. That's wonderful. So this is helpful. Thanks, Kelly. Awesome. Okay, so yes, my name is Elisa Shargorodsky. I'm in the Philadelphia area and run an organization called Ecosystems. We have been doing work here in the Philadelphia area since 2017. You can progress the slide. Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. So we work in a variety of different ways. We build comprehensive reuse solutions for local businesses, event spaces. We've worked with grocery stores, restaurants, historically, and a few of our projects have been around, building end-to-end systems for and with our partners. We've worked with a local food co-op, which is Weaver's Way Food Cooperative. They have 4 locations across Philadelphia. We helped them build, and we also circulated and provided the warewashing for them to get a reuse system off the ground, which is still in operation today. We circulated 50,000 containers for them during our initial pilot. We've also helped with street festivals that served up to 5,000 attendees first, we just evaluated what the festivals were doing. So the first year we noticed that in 5 hours they generated 900 pounds of garbage. And the following year we helped them with their vendor contracts so that all of the vendors agreed to use reusables, and we had on-site warewashing. And the second year, for 5,000 people, there was only 90 pounds of garbage. So we saw a pretty good success rate with that. Our organization also has a lens for environmental justice, making sure that the communities that are most burdened environmentally are also not responsible for creating the solution. So our organization directs resources towards those communities to ensure that they can have a just transition in their projects and that it's equitable for them. And then lastly, we bring those communities to the table to make sure that those communities have a voice in driving policy changes forward, and that we're not steamrolling them, telling them what they need, but we want to bring them to the table. You can progress the slide, please. So what we are currently involved in is our Philly Unwrapped toolkit, which we're building. Philly Unwrapped is a coalition right now you can see here, these are some of the partners. We have 35 coalition members, which include neighborhood associations, city agencies, universities, individual businesses, community development corporations, neighborhood associations. So all of the partners who have come to the table help in disseminating information, supporting events, and building toolkits and advocating for the policy work. We launched this about 2 years ago, and it's coming along quite well. We're really excited about it because Philadelphia historically has a lens predominantly for solid waste mitigation. We're moving garbage from one place to another, but we don't really have a lens for prevention, and that's something that ECHO is particularly interested in driving, is the prevention piece. You can move the slide forward. So just to give a little bit of overview of how this relates to the food code specifically and reuse locally. In 2017, when we began engaging with Weaver's Way Food Co-op, we were the first organization to use what is in place today, which is health code variance. The variance allows food establishments to provide their own reusables to customers, but those variances didn't exceed to like a customer bringing their container for BYO, or even like it was frowned upon and told us that like customers should not be bringing their containers for takeout. So like if you were eating at an establishment, you could bring your own container, and when you're finished eating, you could put your food in there, but you could not give your container to a restaurant and have them handle it because they were concerned with pathogens being spread. So I think that with this current food code, some of that language has changed and there's a lot more allowances. And then, we also saw several other businesses participate in this variance adaptation, but the challenge at the time was that our health code, even though it allowed it, the health department itself didn't really have a framework for evaluating the businesses. So they were charging businesses money to come and do those evaluations, which we thought was illegal since it was in the food code already as a variance here locally. So we worked with the health department to get them to remove some of the red tape. We worked with Circular Philadelphia on that initiative, which they did. They removed the red tape, and then ECHO and Circular Philadelphia worked with their department to create some training materials for their sanitarians so that they could kind of tie it into their annual evaluations when they're going to the businesses to make sure that the businesses are complying with their health and safety regulations. And so now as any business can, any food sector business can do reuse, but this is kind of tied into the evaluatory process. And then in 2022, we were informed that there was some restrictions on the types of containers that could be used, that they were required to be NSF. And as we reviewed some of the documentation and some of the legal paperwork, we didn't see that requirement. So we were trying to get some clarity on whether it is required for businesses to have NSF because other states don't have that requirement. And it kind of stalled there. We weren't able to get any clarification on whether that is actually required and why it's required. And I've talked with Kelly extensively about this, and we're still kind of seeking clarification for that. So we addressed this with our local councilwoman, Jamie Gautier, recently, and she pulled the departments together to kind of help us get some clarity on that. And we still have not really been able to access the department to get in writing clarification on this NSF restriction, which is confusing for our local businesses. And we're really hoping to get more clarification on that. And get them to the table around this and get them to adopt the 2022 food code, which expands a lot of the provisions. And that's kind of where we're at today is we're bringing the coalition members together to ensure that we have a really solid audience and support of people and organizations who can drive some of this local change forward. You can progress the slide. So as I said before, just to reiterate, some of our local goals here is to modernize the food and safety standards to get the city to adopt the 2022 FDA food code. We have sent a lot of letters encouraging them to adopt this most recent food code, and we're hoping that they will do that. Enable affordable reuse containers. So our organization actually takes the funds that we're able to raise to direct them to businesses who are applying for grants here locally in Philadelphia. So businesses in key neighborhoods that can kind of illustrate need. They will apply to a grant towards our organization, and then our organization doesn't give them money, but we give them the technical assistance and we will help them purchase containers. There's a lot of businesses across Philadelphia that serve disposables to eat-in customers, and that's particularly an area of interest to us to ensure that it's a kind of a closed loop system, and that's an easy trade. And the research that has been done by Rethink Disposable and other organizations show that the average business can save between $3,000 and $22,000 a year on making those types of modifications. So it's a good business case for businesses to make those transitions. And we are encouraging it by providing certain businesses with the resources to do that. And then also to strengthen local collaboration and drive policy forward so that we can get our budgets to reflect prevention and not only mitigating efforts. Can move the slide forward. So yes, the federal regulation.
1 minute left, Elisa.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we're pretty much done here, but this, I didn't include a lot of links in here, but if there was a link that was shared towards our link tree that has a whole ton of resources. So please do check that out. And if anybody at any point in time wants to connect with me, I'm accessible by email, and I will leave my email here and also on the following slide. You can go to the following slide. You will see that there is additional resources. There's a little QR code here where you can read more about some of the data and details so that I didn't bog down this presentation with it. And also here's my contact, so anybody can reach out to me at any time. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Lisa. Really great presentation. We have some great questions coming in too. We have one final speaker to welcome, last but not least, Yayoi Koizumi is the founder of Zero Waste Ithaca, based in Central New York, and co-founder of BYO US Reduces, a national network, supporting Bring Your Own advocates across the country. She leads grassroots campaigns from securing BYO rights in New York to challenging synthetic turf projects at Cornell. Her work focuses on advocating zero waste, fighting plastic pollution, and advancing local, community-driven solutions over corporate false solutions to the solid waste crisis. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to Northeast Recycling Council and Center for Biological Diversity for having me. I'm Yayoi, and I want to start my presentation with one of my biggest pet peeves. I'm constantly told that Bring Your Own is just about individual consumer choice, a low-hanging fruit that is inferior to reuse strategies such as big structural work like extended producer responsibility, EPR. But I think BYO is structural. It changes systems. Most countries promote BYO. The United States seems to be unique in that regard as the one that's still restricting it under state health and food codes. If BYO is such a small act by individuals, why do powerful interests fight to keep this illegal here in the United States? Maybe it's not a low-hanging fruit. Maybe it's the fruit that packs power. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here are some photos from Chili Fest in Ithaca last March. These are screenshots from our Instagram reel. To save time, I didn't add the video, but just had screenshots for this slide. It started with, here's the problem. The reel started with here's a shot of a trash bin full of single use from the festival. And then it went on to show so many people showing up with their cups for the festival, like these, as you can see. And this was not officially allowed, but people did it anyway. And vendors quietly accepted them because it just made sense. This is actually happening all over. Small businesses allowing BYO under the table. In other states like California, Washington, Illinois, Oregon, and Maine, this is legal. BYO is a foundation of community-led reuse. It empowers ordinary people and small businesses to act directly without waiting for some company to scale reuse for them. And when the conditions are right, people can be motivated to bring their own. It's possible. Next slides, please. Thank you. In 2022, we launched a BYO sticker program in Ithaca. The stickers tell customers reusables are welcome here. It's a small visual cue that normalizes a bigger cultural shift. This is Helen, owner of Rosie's Cafe, and one of our newest partners. We promote participating local small businesses on social media. They get some spotlights, and we get to promote our BYO program, helping to normalize it. It works well for both of us, and it's fun. Next slide, please. Ithaca's BYO sticker program started with a few cafes and spread fast. We now have over 100 businesses participating. We are all volunteer-run, own fundraising and micro grants, and no corporate contracts. Reuse can grow organically when people care and connect. It's interesting and troubling to note that most EPR programs, extended producer responsibility programs, exclude BYO from the definition of reuse. Next slide, please. The idea of BYO sticker program came from a social media post by Zero Waste Chef, an award-winning author. The program came from Canada, where she is from. We noticed challenges in the laws at state levels where people are prohibited to practice this simple BYO action in the US and thought we needed to support each other and launched a national network, BYO US Reduces. It started with just a few groups, but now we have a few dozens of local BYO initiatives across the country. Local groups share sticker templates, flyers, and support each other. We meet every 2 months. Our meetings are open to everyone, from organizers to homemakers. Next meeting is in December with a guest from the food app Too Good To Go. And everybody's welcome. We have an idea about the February speaker, and for April, we have another exciting guest, Rebecca Burgess from Fiber Shed from California, about regional soil-to-soil textile work. Our chapters in Oregon and California are thriving thanks to state laws that allow full BYO. We want the freedom here in Northeast, and for us, for Zero Waste Ithaca, particularly in New York. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I will share what we are working on in New York. New York has several BYO groups. There is a bill in the state legislature regarding BYO, but it only confirms what's already legal in New York, such as bringing our own cup for coffee. And the bill ignores, as it is right now, takeout for food and, takeout from both at restaurants and grocery stores. And it's not very helpful. So we launched a petition with our own proposed amendment to make BYO fully legal for food and also to protect businesses from liability. Next slide, please. Thank you. So far, the petition garnered over 1,000 individuals and over 50 businesses and organizations across the state. We are asking everyone to sign and share, especially businesses and organizational sign-ons. The more public support, the harder it will be for the legislators to ignore. Please consider signing on and sharing it. If you could drop the link in the chat, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. That's not the right link. Let me give you the link again.
I have the others. I'm going to add them.
Okay, great. Thank you. So please consider signing it, and we appreciate business organization sign-ons, and those will make a huge impact, a big difference. Please sign on wherever you are. You don't have to be in New York. Just as we count on the precedents in California, Illinois, Oregon, and Maine, other states can use our example if we get to amend this bill and pass this bill. So please sign from everywhere. Next, please. How can you help? Here's what you can do right now. Sign the petition, support BYO businesses, and talk to local officials about BYO ordinances. And some of you might be the local officials. If you we get inquiries from our local county sustainability committee. So I think it is possible for you to engage in that capacity as well. And if your community doesn't have a BYO initiative yet, please join our network, BYO US Reduces. Thank you very much. Please, next slide, please. To conclude, BYO may look small, but it's the low-hanging fruit that really packs power. It gives control back to communities instead of corporate reuse schemes. This photo is from our plastic-free July event. We put 800 pounds of trash, including hundreds of bottles and takeout containers. And it was a lot. And imagine the impact if BYO were fully allowed, normalized, and become part of our everyday culture. If you want to, please consider supporting BYO as a part of the systemic change, and don't please do not look down on it as if it's like a small individual action. It is a structural issue when so many states are prohibiting it only in the United States. There are powerful interests against BYO. If you want to stay in touch, please find the contact info in the package shared by the webinar organizers. And we are a volunteer operation with small donors. It's all about grassroots and community power. Please support. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you for helping making BYO a basic right in New York, in the Northeast, and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yayoi. That was really great and a lot of things well said. Thank you everyone for your presentations. There is a lot more to discuss, so I would like to jump into a bit of a moderated discussion. And let's see. Hopefully everyone's screen is visible here. Let's kickstart a question that seems to be troubling a lot of people. If health departments are not receptive or not being helpful, what are examples of workarounds for that? And anyone can answer this if you have experience or ideas. Yeah, Lisa.
Great. So I think that because we've had some experience with this, something that we found to be helpful in getting their attention is to go to our council members and to let them know what our challenge has been and to share the communications that we've had with the department. We put together a folder that showed all of the efforts we've made to communicate with our health authority and also to kind of illustrate our past relationship with them to show that we've already done our due diligence and have not been receiving a reply or not been able to get the progress that we've hoped for. And that seemed to actually move the needle in the right direction. So even though we haven't gotten to the end game and haven't fully solved, I think it's very important to know that council members and other people in local government can be of assistance to help get the attention that you're needing.
Absolutely. No, that's a great insight. Does anyone have anything to add to Elisa's solutions?
Yeah, I'll just add that similar to what Lisa was saying, in addition to your local council members, you can also contact your legislators. State employees only have so much ability to change policies like that. So if you're a public citizen and you're interested in something, then talking to your legislator and even gathering other people together of like minds and contacting them in bulk, that kind of thing can really move the needle.
Thank you, Megan.
This is Kelly. I'll throw in one other potential entity, and Sonia can maybe chime in because I know y'all had talked about this, but there is a professional environmental health association of which health inspectors join, and that was who we wrote and published the paper through. And they each have the state chapters and maybe even local chapters. Sonia, I don't know if you ultimately did work with them, but that might be another place where you can go and have a bunch of health inspectors in one place to talk to.
Thanks, Kelly. Sonia, anything to add there? No. Good summary. All right, great. Well, and folks on the webinar, if you have other questions, especially about this issue, speakers are available to you as a resource, or feel free to add them into the chat here. But Kelly, a question for you. it looks like a lot of your information was about restaurants primarily. Do you have any insights around events or like grocery bulk bins, farmers markets, food trucks, things like that?
Yeah, yeah. And remind me at the end of this, I want to talk about the food donation stuff that was in the chat, even though I did answer it there. So Anthony just looked at the food code for food establishments. And this is where it gets confusing. So if you look at your state food code, your food code might be administered by multiple state agencies. So a lot of times what they do is they break out farmers markets and, like, I don't know, like a deli or something might be managed and overseen by your Department of Ag, because maybe there's a butcher shop in the back of the deli, right? And then your restaurants are kind of handled by your Department of Health. And so we were getting questions with Anthony's data about food trucks, about, delis and stuff. And so, and bulk aisle, like that's another one. And I want to be clear that when you ask me for your data, if you ask me for your data, it is really just focused on restaurants. But now the work that has been done by these 5 states and the updated code is more encompassing. So California addressed events, Washington addressed bulk aisle, Ohio and Illinois, and I think Maine too, right, addressed bulk. And so, yeah, there's work to be done on multiple fronts. And Yayoi is hot and heavy about delis. Man, she wants to be able to take her container to a deli. And, so all of these things can be managed by a different entity. So yeah, more work to be done on that. We are going to try to put an intern on it. But well, was there anything else on that, y'all, before I move to the food donation thing really quick?
Yayoi.
Yeah, I'm big on BYO at the grocery stores because this is allowed in a few states like California and Illinois and Oregon to a limited capacity, and Australia and Canada. And we do not know why this is like prohibited in the US. And also when it comes to BYO, I'm kind of, according to my research, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the New York State adopted 2001 FDA food code, but that adopted food code poses no legal obstacle to proposed BYO amendments from us. The FDA food code is a voluntary guidance document and not a binding federal law. States are free to modify, disregard, or repeal any provision they have adopted from it. And so I think I just wanted to say that. And so I hope that New York will adopt 2024 food code supplement, the up-to-date one. And that will be a great gesture. But I think, if I'm not wrong, such adoption will be largely symbolic. And states seems to me are allowed to do what they think is the most reasonable for public health, to protect ourselves from microplastics and PFAS leaching from all those single-use plastic containers, and also to, of course, protect the environment. So
that is a great segue. And I just want to help clarify some of the dates in people's minds. So your state might be on a food code from 2017 backwards. So I do believe New York is on a very old food code. So most folks are on this 2017. A 2022 food code did come out. So your state may be on a 2022 food code, but it didn't really address what we care about. So if you're going to go advocate to your state to update their food code, you can ask them to update to 2022, but it doesn't get to reuse. You want to ask them to update to the 2024 amendment to the 2022 food code, and or if this takes a long time, because we're talking about bureaucracy here and government, you're going to ask them to update what will be the 2026 full 4-year entity food code. So hopefully that makes sense. But I was doing a little bit of Googling over here about this food donation because there's one that's still kind of already in the chat and one that I had answered. So the Conference for Food Protection, which, you know, Sonia mentioned, and we put a link to in the chat, is taking up the topic of food donation. So the same thing that we went through for food code and reuse is happening like right now for food donation. So there is a component within the FDA food code that addresses the food code donation. But let me keep in mind, the same thing will be true with food donations. So just because the FDA maybe decrees X, Y, or Z about food donation, it will be implemented at the state level. So the minute you figure out how to update reuse in your state food code, ask them to update food donation codes. You know, it is the same process and the same entity. And I think your audience in particular, Megan, probably has that intersecting interest of food and reuse and recycling that, you know, you could make some of these changes in one fell swoop once you figure out how to update your state food code. So
Yeah,
hopefully that was helpful.
Really, no, that's really good. That's good guidance. So thank you. All right. And we are going to get to the questions in the Q&A chat, so please feel free to keep those coming. But I'm going to turn over to you, Megan, and looking at CVEI, or consumption-based emissions inventory. How can we get more people recognizing the climate benefits of reuse?
Yeah, I think that's a great question to think about from a waste perspective, because waste, as was discussed at your conference this year, waste is often kind of lost in the climate conversations. But now that we have tools like the consumption-based emissions inventory tools that EPA has developed, and I'll just mention that those may be taken down or may have even been taken down from the EPA website, but fortunately the researcher who worked on developing those tools in conjunction with ERG is moving to a university, so that work is going to live on, the resources will be available, and their goal, and they're close, I mean, they've already developed the system for states to be able to go on and really pull their own data, as well as releasing consumption-based emissions inventory for all the states. So it's still pretty high level, but I can say that for Maine and for a lot of the other states, manufacturing was the highest category for consumption-based emissions. So that breaks down into, you know, manufacturing is our stuff. It's not quite as simple as that, but I think tools like that, just being aware that there are resources that states can go to pull and look at their consumption-based emissions inventory, even if it's pretty high level. Another tool that I really love is the EPA's WARM tool, because that was what I had used in modeling my slides. You can just plug in different materials and it gives you the life cycle emissions impact. So it looks at things from basically from cradle to grave, or you can also model systems of reuse in there. You can model product lifetime expansion. They have a lot of really great guidance on how to use it. And it's just a great way to help people understand that managing materials in different ways really does have a huge environmental impact in terms of emissions, and you can provide the data yourself and show it to people. And I feel like those graphs, like that one that I showed, just help get the point across. Like, this is why we should be talking about reuse, because look at how much it reduces emissions over the lifespan once you keep the systems, you build the systems up and you have them in place. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's great. I love the consumption-based inventory, and I really hope there's momentum to continue to transition to that kind of analysis for states. And you can benefit really well. There's a lot of great resources. Again, we'll be sending those out after.
Yeah, I will dig up the links to the new home if I can get those. And if I don't have them yet, then I'll send them as soon as I do.
Thank you. Thank you. Elisa, this is I think a very poignant question. What are the most practical first steps a city or county can take if they want to adopt the FDA food code and expand reuse locally?
What are the most practical steps? I think that for us, what helped was bringing partners together and community members. I think that that is a really strong first step because going alone is not the best path forward. Showing that there's local interest to drive these initiatives forward is critical, especially if you're able to engage other city departments, which has been useful for us, especially in some of our grant applications. We were able to get some city agencies to support us, and that helped us move it forward, and also local reps. We have a community organizer who reached out to all the local reps to let them know about our initiative and invite them to our coalition and other EJ groups, like getting the environmental justice component really elevated and helping leaders understand the correlation between environmental outcomes and single-use plastic. I think sometimes there isn't a scope for that. So I think that that's been something that's been helpful for us.
Thank you. That's very, very valuable advice. I think one of the kind of going back to the questions and the challenges around food safety, and health. A lot of agencies worry that reuse compromises food safety. How can advocates reassure them that these practices are safe? And Elisa, if you could speak. Well, actually, Yayo, you start, and then if anyone else has anything, chime in, please.
Well, so there is a concern about cross-contamination, and I get this question a lot with regard to BYO practice. And I think it's relevant to all reuse. So I'm going to say this. For BYO practice, and I think it's even more so with, deposit return system, there has not been a single documented case of cross-contamination from BYO in the history. So first of all, we would like to see that if there's any peer-reviewed studies on that. On the other hand, we have so many peer-reviewed studies coming out in the past 5 years or so about microplastics, nanoplastics, PFAS, and thousands of other toxic plastic chemicals leaching into our food from our single-use foodwares. And so what do we prioritize? At this point, this is a public health issue of public health, not just environment. And do we look for the undocumented, purely theoretical scaremongering about BYO and other reuse cases? Or do we look at the actual documented cases of PFAS and microplastics affecting our heart health, impacting cancer rate, and contributing to diabetes, immune disorder, Parkinson's, and whatnot? The list goes on and on and on. And so I think it's a matter of what do we prioritize? What is safety? What safety are we talking about here?
You raised some really excellent points, and I really hope that that continues to rise to the surface of the general public's awareness. For those that aren't, obviously a lot of us are aware of this, but yeah, that's a huge issue. And I think what you said was we are against powerful forces, more or less, and so we have to continue doing what we can. So this is why this webinar is so exciting. I do want to leave 5 minutes to touch on the audience questions here because we do end at 2:30. So looking at, looks like the first one we can connect with Chelsea later because she wasn't able to stay on. So we'll follow up with her. But looking at Susan Richmond here, I'm part of a group in New Hampshire that now has over 5,000 signatures asking that single-use plastic bags not be given out at grocery stores. will not become a bill this year due to partisan politics, but we want to talk to grocery CEOs. So does anyone have advice on that? On how to reach them, on maybe, what approaches or strategies to take there, or anything to leverage?
Well, I can provide some context for Maine. We have a Grocers and Food Producers Association and a Retail Association, and both of them were actually part of the work that went into forming Maine's plastic bag reduction law. And they even helped us do outreach. They hosted webinars talking about the law. So they were very helpful, and they're a good way to reach a lot of the grocers because that's their member base. So I would recommend trying to do some research and see if you can find your equivalent. I assume other states probably have similar organizations like we do here.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that one?
I will say the Conference for Food Protection has a bunch of grocery, probably not the CEOs, but anyway, grocery VPs maybe. And you can join that as an advocate. And there are not a lot of advocates in the space. So if you have the means and the time, you might want to look at joining that. They are there.
Thank you. So that was a really great question. And then we do have another specific question about reuse for medical pill containers or BYO pill containers. I don't know, Yayoi, if you've heard of anything around bring your own medicinal pill container to the pharmacy.
I think that's great. That's not an area that I have been working on particularly, but like there's so much waste in the prescription little bottles, and it makes complete sense for it to be reusable and returnable.
And my recycling friends, right? Aren't they like difficult to recycle because they're so small, they get stuck in the machines? So yeah, I will say if you're not involved in Upstream's reuse network, I think they changed it. I don't have it off the top of my head, but there are some great manufacturers in that space that can help, create prototypes and new containers for some of these things that we're identifying. So it's Upstream Solutions, and you could become a member of that group.
Thank you. Yeah, I think anything related to medicine can be difficult. I literally went into CVS the other day and tried to return a pill container, and they said, "Oh, we can't. We have to throw this out." And meanwhile, I didn't realize there's a bin outside of the corner where it's supposed to be a reuse recycling program for that. And the pharmacist wasn't even aware of it. So, I mean, talk about challenging issues. All right, let's get to this last question here. Amherst, Massachusetts Board Health member. Mount Holyoke College is doing well. Is there any intel on UMass Amherst College, and Hampshire College and their programs? I suspect colleges are more ready to embrace this kind of thing than the private sector. Not sure if EOH has any jurisdiction over the education institutions on this topic, as they're generally exempt to a lot of local bylaws and tax assessment. Does anyone want to comment on that? Sonia, I don't know if,
Yeah, I mentioned Mount Holyoke College. We support a lot of businesses and institutions in the area, and I always am very protective of everyone's story. So I only tell stories that have explicit permission for what we've written to share publicly. But Jack, feel free to email me and I can introduce you to different people and let you know what's going on. But I will say there's a lot of traction in the area, in the Pioneer Valley.
excellent. That's exciting and a promising answer there. All right. Well, we are literally reached the 2:30 mark. So I just want to thank you so much again to this whole group for getting together and sharing your experiences here. And hopefully collectively, we will, as a society, continue to see reuse increase and expand and help our planet. So thank you all. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you so much for joining and for your questions.
Thank you.